Halloween, the famous Halloween episode with your part-time controller. I'm with today Countess Justine Townsend. She's also a manager at YPTC, but on this day, she's Countess Mistress of the Dark. We're going to be talking about the real roles of a fiduciary. They're kind of scary, and Justine's going to be talking to us about what they mean and what they look like. I'm Julia C. Patrick. You're Countess. I think I should be called Witch. But anyway, I'm representing the ancient Korean culture here because anything K-pop or all that is going on is such a hot thing. So we want to really invite you all in. And this is Justine. I was telling you in the green room, this has to be one of our favorite episodes every year. Thank you for being here.
Oh, I love it. I love it. How can I pass up the chance to get dressed up and be silly about something so important as fiduciary duties?
I love it. I love it. Well, you've got the best attitude, and we're going to learn from you today. You know, we learn from so many people across this great country of ours, and we are here each and every day because we have these amazing presenting sponsors. They include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Holdings Nonprofit Banking, Interim Executives Academy, your part-time controller, where Countess Justine joins us from, Fundraisers Friday, and JMT Consulting. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. And Justine, wow, you have become so famous in our team for your amazing costumes over the years. And I was listening to you in the green room. I was telling your team, who I love working with, but I'm like, hey, we got to do this with Justine. She has like upped our game. So
yeah, I'm pretty fearlessly, we'll go all out. We got a nice bloody handprints on the wall behind me as well.
Oh my God, great. I really, really do. I think you're fabulous. And again, this is a scary topic. And so we got to get into it. Talk to us about these legal duties. Is this just something that somebody made up?
No, so this is actually legal requirements all throughout the United States. So that's what's very scary, is that if you're a board member, you're already bound by these 3 duties, whether you know it or not. And these are your fiduciary duties because you have a legal and ethical obligation to act on behalf of the organization with their best interest in heart. So you cannot act with your own best interest. You have to adhere to these duties. And if you don't, you can be financially or legally liable. And that's the part that's super scary for the board member side of this, is that you are legally responsible and ethically responsible to adhere to these 3 duties. And that's the duty of care, the duty of loyalty, and the duty of obedience. You must follow those.
So I'm going to witness to you, and I did bring this up in the green room, that I had served on 2 boards, which both had budgets that exceeded the $15 million mark before I'd ever heard of this. And when
horrifying.
It is horrifying. And I'm ashamed to admit this. Now, I knew there was like fiduciary roles, and but I was like a little fuzzy on them. And I'm calling that out on my own because I didn't educate myself.
Well, and that's such a disservice, though, to our board members when we do that, when we bring a board member onto the board without that board orientation to make sure that they know what they're signing up for. So don't be embarrassed. That should have been part of your board orientation.
Well, this is the thing, Justine. I don't think it was just me. I think it's like all the other people sitting around those tables. I think if we went across our communities and we asked, do you understand this? It'd be like, that's not for us.
I know there's some kind of legal requirement, but I'm not sure what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And then, I think sometimes we think, oh, it's a scare tactic, but it's a legit thing, right?
It's legitimate, and it is not a scare tactic. And there are opportunities for you to actually be held financially liable and legally liable. And as we kind of go through these three different, we're going to talk about those horror stories, when that can happen and how that happens.
Okay, so let's dig into it. And for those of you watching live or on our archive, we'll recap these again at the end of the episode. So let's jump into this role, duty of care. What does this mean?
So it just means that you have to act with the same care that any other reasonably prudent person, and prudent just means if you had these facts, would any reasonable person do this? Would they behave in that same way in this similar situation? And then it's active participation in the board meetings. It means reading and understanding the financial statements. So if you don't understand the financial statements, then you need to say something, you need to ask questions, or you need to seek out other education on how to understand those financial statements. There's tons of webinars out there, tons of free information out there on how to understand those financial statements if that's the part you're struggling with. You need to ask questions so that you can make informed decisions based on the facts and the best interest of that nonprofit. And so the really scary situation here would be a ghost board member, where we have a board member who we never see because he's not following that duty of care and showing up and doing the work that they signed up for. And instead, they're kind of haunting the meetings because we maybe are talking about them sometimes and maybe trying to like sign them up for a committee. So they're a haunter of the meetings, but they're not there. So that's your ghost board member, is the board member who's not following that duty of care. And that's the horror for the organization side. But for the board member side, when you're not following that duty of care and you're not understanding the financial statements, what if the organization isn't paying their payroll taxes and you have not been looking at the financials to see that liability go up and up and up, and all of a sudden when the feds come knocking, you're liable and your D&O insurance does not cover unpaid payroll taxes. So that is a very serious situation for a board member, where you could be held financially liable for payroll taxes just for being a ghost. That's your ghost tax.
Wow, that's like super specific that, you think, oh, they just don't show up, so you discount them. Board member, you're like, we don't put them on committees, we don't call them to task, we don't even follow board policies. But then when something happens, it is really amplified. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
So
and it's serious very quickly.
Yeah, and I think, Justine, was really interesting that you pointed out that it has extenuating ripples that that's why we need to understand these things, right? Because it's not just it's not just a disengagement issue. I think that's like one of those things. A lot of times we'll be like, oh, we just have disengaged board members.
And then we start thinking about how to re-engage the board members, and we think of it as not being a huge issue, but it is a potential major liability for the board member, and it's a huge problem for the organization. And when you're not having proper governance and you don't have the support from your board.
Okay, so we have the duty of care. Now let's talk about the duty of loyalty. Loyalty is kind of an interesting word because sometimes we look askance at that in our country. Signing loyalty oaths, when you think of loyalty, I think in a little different context. Explain this to us.
Yes. So this is not the loyalty you're normally thinking of, right? Loyalty, like no matter what you do, I'm going to be here. That's not what this is. What this is this is the fiduciary duty to put your interest behind the interest of the organization. You must put the organization's best interest above your own personal interest. And if you cannot, you must remove yourself from those decisions. So this is where we need to get those conflict of interest policies, right? And that is a question on the 990. So this is something where we're required to tell on ourselves every year, are we doing this? Do we have that conflict of interest policy? And are we getting the disclosures from our board members every year? And this is the perfect time of year. Use this spooky, scary episode to remind you to start getting those conflict of interest disclosures from your board right now, so that you have them all in hand before the end of the year, right? And if you have a board member who is using the organization for their own personal interest, this is my costume. This is your vampire board member, because they're literally sucking the life out of your organization. And we never want that.
No.
So that's the big one there. This is not a lack of loyalty. This, like, as you would normally think about loyalty, this is a lack of putting the other one first. And you would see this with, let's say you have a board member who has a piece of property and the organization is searching for a piece of property to buy. And this might not be in the best area. It might not be exactly what the organization is looking for, but the board member who gives big every year really needs to unload this property before the end of the year. And so there's a lot of pressure for the organization from this board member to purchase this piece of property, even though it is not exactly the right property. So even if it's sold at a fair market value or even below market, if the board member is just pushing the organization to purchase this property so that they can get it off of their portfolio before the end of the year, that's not a benefit to the organization, even if it's being sold at a lower cost than market. So it can seem like a board member is acting with that duty of loyalty, even though they're not. And so it's very important that it's in appearance as well as in reality that you're putting the interest of the organization first, which is why we would want to recuse ourselves from any vote on anything that is our own personal business where our interests are at play here.
You know, Countess, mistress of the dark. I think it's very interesting that you brought up something, and I'd love for you to amplify this a little bit. You brought up the notion of in practice, and these are my words, not your words, but things that might appear not to be legit or loyal. Can you explain that, and why? Is that tied to what I always hear the accountants saying, tone at the top? Is that a concept?
Well, tone at the top is really about internal controls, right? And having high integrity at the top and really sticking to those internal controls at the top and sending that message out. So this is similar in that when you have that duty of loyalty and you're acting in the best interest of the organization, it does encourage everyone else to also act in the best interest of the organization and to be fulfilling their duty of loyalty. But this is not quite that. This is with the appearance of loyalty. This is behaving beyond reproach. It means we're not inviting in any suspicions. Right? We're not being suspicious at all. We're being as transparent and open as possible. And studies show the most effective boards, the most successful boards are the boards that really prioritize transparency and engagement. So that's that duty of care, the engagement piece, right? And then I would say duty of loyalty is really the transparency. That's when you have those super high functioning boards, when you're really prioritizing that.
Right. So one of the things that I love that you said, and I marched this out this time of year always, and that is get these documents and these policies signed and executed by the end of this year so that when you start January 1, everybody's good to go and you can feel confident as a leader, whether you're a board chair or you're a CEO, executive director, that all of these boxes have been ticked. Because you mentioned, and I would love for you to go back just a little bit, the COI policy, the conflict of interest policy, is one of the things that you're asked about on that 1099, right? You don't have
Yeah.
you don't attach what that policy looks like, right? You just say, yes, we have it. Is that correct?
So you check the box and say, yes, we have it. But then in Schedule O, that's where you disclose if there were any conflicts of interest. And so that is required. So that's the other reason why we really want to work hard to get those conflict of interest disclosure signed and given back to the board liaison or to the executive director before the end of the year, because this is where we can really make sure that we are staying on top of that, right? And that if there are any, then we know exactly what we need to disclose in the 990 prior to the end of the year. So we're not chasing that down while we're trying to follow it. In addition to that, having a conflict of interest policy, checking that box, disclosing your conflicts of interest, also gives you points in all of the nonprofit watchdogs, right? So GuideStar, Candid, right? All of those will give you points when you check that I have that conflict of interest policy. And when you put it on your website, hint, hint, you get extra points for putting it on your website. So it is worth it to put up that conflict of interest policy and just go the extra mile on your transparency.
So one last question I have for you about this is that the policy is probably not going to change from year to year, but am I hearing from you, Countess, that we need to execute that document every year?
Every single year, because
Okay.
the other piece of that, yes, the policy doesn't usually change,
Yeah.
but your disclosures can. So last year I didn't have a conflict of interest, but this year my business changed. Last year I didn't have a conflict of interest, but over the summer I married another board member. And now I do have a conflict of interest because now I got two married board members and I need to disclose that these two board members are married. We probably need to keep them off the same committees, right? Like there's an opportunity there for things to change. Life is long and very exciting. Things change all the time.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure we allow for capturing that on an annual basis.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you for giving
Thank
us
you
that,
for clarifying.
no, that's interesting. Okay, so we've done duty of care, duty of loyalty. Now this one sounds intimidating, and it's a word we don't really use in the English language. Duty of obedience. It's somewhat controversial just to hear the word.
Especially well, once you don't have small children anymore, then you very rarely use it. But I feel like when my kids were small, I felt like I used that all the time, right? So no,
Yeah.
it's not duty of obedience in the same way, really, as we're used to using it with our kids. This is obedience to the laws, the policies, the rules, the IRS requirements, the donor requirements, the donor restrictions. This is saying that every single law, policy, rule, commitment that the organization has made, I, as a board member, am responsible for ensuring that that's carried out. This is also a duty of obedience to the mission. So a board member here might not realize that their job is to ensure that the mission is always being honored, prioritized, and carried out, and that the vision of the organization and that mission and those priorities of the organization are what's actually the work that's actually getting done by the organization. If we're not doing that, then we're not following that duty of obedience. So our horror story, our Halloween monster for this one is a zombie who just is chasing dollars and not worried about the mission and is letting that mission creep And I use zombie because much like a zombie wanders around going brains, 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 this board member is wandering around going money, 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 right? This is a mindless board member chasing the money and having no duty of obedience to that mission. And that could be a very scary situation for that board member or for that organization. Should a donor sue the organization for not adhering to that donor restriction or for misusing donor restricted dollars, if the organization does not have the funds to pay back that donor, the board member, that zombie board member, could be responsible for paying it back. So it's very important that we're not just chasing the money, that we're making sure it's something we can actually follow through with, that we can honor the promises that we're making to our donors.
You know, you said something really interesting, and I didn't think about how mission creep could factor into this concept of obedience, but it totally fits, doesn't it? I mean, that's the perfect example of nonprofits going out and chasing the bucks, and it kind of tweaks their programming, but they look the other way because they want the money. But then ultimately it becomes an unsustainable burden.
And so when an organization is accepting grants and accepting money or applying for grants, and board members are hearing about the grants that are being applied for, the funds that are being accepted, making sure that that's like actually the work that the organization is doing and that those donor restrictions can be upheld is a huge part of this duty of obedience. We often think about, well, I got to make sure the 990 gets filed every year and filed on time so we don't lose our nonprofit exempt status, right? Like that's the other big one here, is making sure that that 990 is being filed. Because if an organization loses their status because you had 3 years of non-filing, it is the board that is liable.
Right. It's so fascinating. I mean, I think it's also really intriguing that you need to, as a board and an organization, be very clear on, you know, we use that mission, vision, and values, but this is where that really comes to play, doesn't it? I mean, that you have, as a board, articulated and you have approved in a qualified, you know, voting centric environment, that this is where you're going, right? Because that also has to tie to your letter of determination. You can't just decide to vote, oh, we're going to now do this or do that, right? You have to remain true to
that letter of determination. And if there is shift, then you have to report that in the 990. And so that's the other place where we can have kind of a horror situation develop if we're not reporting back in the 990 that we have had that mission creep, that we have moved away from that determination letter, what we said we'd be doing. That is a requirement that we disclose that.
Do, you know, especially for organizations that are maybe long and storied, and they've changed their service areas as their communities have changed. Does this obedience factor in? Like, do you have to go back to the powers that be at the IRS and re-describe what your work is? Not just in the 990 filings, but, and this might seem like an off question, but I see a lot of organizations, at least in my community, as our communities matured, they're kind of responding to different issues that the community has. They're doing the right thing. It's just that maybe it's morphed a little.
So when that happens, there is a section on the 990 for you to disclose that to the IRS, that you have had a fundamental shift. When it depends on your state and what kind of state filing you have to do with your attorney general in your state, you might also need to communicate that to the attorney general in your state in order to retain your sales tax exemption in that state. So you'll want to check your state and check with your tax attorney or your accountant, your tax accountant, to see if in your state what you're required to do to communicate that. But there is a section on the 990 for you to disclose your changes.
Cool. Good advice. Really, really good advice. Because I got to believe that this is the reality for so many of our 1.8 million registered nonprofits, right? I mean, how you started in one point of the journey is maybe you've solved the problem, right?
Yeah. And now we need to move on. That's the goal. The goal is to solve the problem, right?
Yeah,
every nonprofit should have the goal of going out of business one day because we solved the problem we were trying to solve.
Yeah. I also am seeing a lot more, mergers and acquisitions. I'm sure you're seeing that as well, where, you have an organization that's like, we love this idea, but we just can't fulfill it, and then they're looking for another nonprofit who's well run and has the resources maybe to take over something.
Well, that's another reason why we might see a fiduciary, a fiscal agent relationship. And so that's a different kind of fiduciary duty, but you can have a fiscal agent relationship where you get a fiscal sponsor basically, so that you can carry out some activities without maybe having to go get that tax exempt status. And if you are not sure what your mission is going to be.
Right.
Or if you're in the very infancy, having a fiscal sponsor can kind of help while you're trying to figure out exactly how you're going to execute on that mission when you're in that
Right.
infancy phase, so that you are honoring that duty of obedience.
I love it. You just sparked an idea. We need to have you come back on and talk about how YPTC is seeing these fiscal sponsorships work, because I think it's such an excellent opportunity for so many folks. Well, Countess, you have been remarkable. You may lead a shadowy life at night, but during the day, you are spot on when it comes to nonprofit accounting and finance. So thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Let's have you really quickly, as we finish up, reframe these three core legal duties, because for some folks, it's going to be a little bit of a head spinner.
So I would say, think of the duty of care is your duty to do what you signed up for.
Okay.
Right. And I would say your duty of loyalty, that is your duty to put someone else first, and that's the organization. Put the organization first above yourself. And then the duty of obedience is follow the rules, be a goody two shoes.
I love it. Well, this has been fabulous. As I said at the top of the show, one of our absolute all-time favorites to visit the nonprofit show. We like to call her Countess Justine Townsend, but she is one of the magical people that leads so many of our nonprofits to success when it comes to accounting and finance. And she's a manager at Your Part-Time Controller. You can learn more about Justine and more of the team at YPTC.com. That's Your Part-Time Controller. Justine, I learn so much from you. Aside from the fun, I learn a lot. So thank you, my friend.
Fun and educational. That's my brand.
I love it. I love it. Well, I know you're going to have a busy night tonight, being that it's Halloween. And so we're going to let you get on your way, because we know you have a lot to do, not only for our nonprofits, but for just the community in general, and causing some mayhem, I'm assuming. Who never causes mayhem with us are our presenting sponsors. They include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Holdings Nonprofit Banking, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, Fundraisers Friday, and JMT Consulting. Again, always one of our favorite days of the year when we get to meet with our friends from YPTC. So thank you so much for setting us straight, Countess.
Thank you. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween. Hey, we like to end each and every episode. I'm thinking of all of that candy that's going to be distributed. And the message is this: to stay well so you can do well. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again.